And we are streaming live. So I'm going to jump out. Again, enjoy. And
Okay.
I'll be behind scenes.
All right. And are we are queued up and ready to begin?
I believe so.
All right, here we go. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, family. Welcome to our Future Voices panel. I definitely want to begin by saying our title is slightly incorrect. It's a little misleading because, yes, while the voices you will hear tonight are voices of the future, they are equally voices of the present as well. And each of them is putting their hand to the plow and pushing family, faith, and freedom forward in their respective fields. And so we're going to open up with just a few introductions. Again, my name is Tanya Pollard. I've been in education for over 20 years, working with students from preschool to high school. And I currently teach at North Star Academy's Lincoln Park High School in Newark, New Jersey. And over the years, I've been honored to serve in the village with amazing youth who demonstrate seriousness of purpose. And I'm sure you too, Facebook family, will come to know and love many of them as well. And we're going to begin with Sonia. Sonia, can you summarize for us a little bit about the work that you have been called to do?
Hi, my name is Sani Lacoma, and I'm the founder and executive director of Brown Kids Read Incorporated, which is a nonprofit that I started to motivate all children, but especially children of color, to read more diverse literature. And with this organization, I have created a bookstore called the Brown Reads Bookshelf, which is online and pop-up bookstore where we sell books that are all written by and or featuring people of color. So that's how we make the revenue for Brown Kids Read. I also host a podcast called the Book Junkie Podcast for teenagers so that we can talk about young adult books and relate those stories to real life circumstances. And I also partner with schools. I interview authors from contacts with publishing companies, and I try to create as many programs as possible to get children involved in the world of reading.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And Mr. Joseph, will you please share how you have chosen to serve the people?
Good evening, everyone. How are you? My name is Minister Joseph Johnson. I am a youth minister here at Cathedral International. I also, for my day job, I work under Congressman Frank Pallone's New Brunswick District Office, and I am a field rep and staff assistant. I also am the policy chair for the Middlesex County Young Democrats, as well as the social media chair for the Middlesex County Black Caucus. One of my most notable things that I kind of hold near and dear to my heart is I'm the founder of the Lena Harris Foundation. It's named after my grandmother, Miss Lena Harris, who passed away from lupus when my mother was around the young adult age. And so we decided to commemorate her life by doing the nonprofit organization. And from there, we mentor youth at J.P. Stevens and Edison High School in Edison, New Jersey, as well as we do some other events to get the community connected to our local officials and raise funds to the Lupus Foundation of America. So thank you guys all for participating. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Gabby, we're looking forward to hearing about your current work for the people.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here virtually. So I am living in Boston now, also an educator and an organizer. I work at MIT as a program assistant for Most Tech and Minds 2 STEM enrichment programs for high school juniors that are particularly targeted toward underrepresented and underserved communities. And I additionally have been dancing throughout my time up here in Boston. I've joined the Afrobeats Dance Boston LLC dance company. So I've been able to build relationships with other Boston-based dancers and dancers around the country. And I recently joined the Party for Socialism and Liberation and do a lot of work with the party to build revolution in the heart of empire in the United States. And yeah, I've been building with other organizers, friends, peers, community members through education work, housing work, anti-racist, anti-imperialist struggles, and really trying to stand in increased unity and solidarity with working class people.
Wow, thank you for that. And Minister Valerie, please share with us how you are leading and serving.
Good evening, everyone. It's just such a blessing to be here. I am an author of Overcoming Obstacles and Single to Marriage. I am an entrepreneur, so I have 4 businesses. Youth Enrichment Center is geared to youth ages 8 to 21, youth and young adults, and we encourage them to be empowered, be motivated, and to be uplifted through the programs that we offer. We offer educational programs such as life skills workshops, education and financial literacy workshops to help them achieve their goals and become successful. I'm also a travel agent, certified travel agent, so I book and sell travel. But in addition to that, I host mission trips all over the world. And I've hosted mission trips to India and also women's retreats in the Bahamas, Cuba, and I believe Miami. I also just wrote my second book. It's titled Single to Marriage. And through this, I just encourage the reader to continue to be pure, holy, and I speak about being holy and righteous. And lastly, I just started a Poshmark, a business to sell clothes and accessories. So I'm excited about this venture and all these ventures that God has called me to do in the world.
Wonderful. Definitely know I will be booking my future travels with you. And would love to hear from you, and Joelle. Please introduce yourselves and how you're serving the beloved community.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having us. We are so honored and blessed and excited to be here. My name is Jordan and I'm Joelle, and we have a number of different things that we're involved with. First and foremost, our full-time jobs. We are content marketing professionals at Media Planet Publishing. I'm a business development manager, and Jordan is our partnership and distribution manager. Yes, we do work at our 9-to-5s together. We're also founders of J&J Enterprises, which houses a number of different brands underneath it, including Happy People Publishing, which is our publishing endeavor with a young man by the name of Austin Pillar, who's our illustrator. We just published our second children's book about 2 weeks ago, which we're very excited about. Also houses Double Dough, which is our hobby baking endeavors, and also Completely Booked, which is Jordan's Bookstagram account that she has a book club and hosts different literature opportunities through that. Yes, and also called very much to do quite a bit of community service. So we are also representing Party with Purpose, which is a nonprofit organization in Hudson County where we currently reside, and we are board members of that organization, and then also co-founders, and I guess you could call us board members for Little Souls Incorporated, that we have with 2 of our friends, Mariah and Jonathan Austin, who some of you may know. And we also are contributors to Hoboken Girl blog here in Hoboken, where we live.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Amir, or would you prefer to be called AJ?
Yeah, AJ works. Hey, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really happy about the opportunity for us to be in conversation about all this stuff that we have prepared. My name is AJ Ballard. I am currently living in Philadelphia. Right now, I'm working at 12 Plus, which is a nonprofit that does work with kids that are in the public high school district system in Philadelphia. So I do career and college readiness counseling with them. And then prior to that, I was working at the public defender's office in Wilmington, Delaware, where I was a founding advocate for the nonprofit Partners for Justice, which helps to sort of deal with the collateral consequences of having an open criminal case. So that can look like helping people with housing, employment, substance abuse and mental health treatment, and stuff like that. So I'm just really excited to be here and talk to all y'all and hear everyone's thoughts.
So we are really excited about this panel tonight, to have such great minds all together. We are looking forward to the pearls of wisdom that you have to offer us. And to frame the discussion for tonight, we're going to listen to a brief clip from Dr. Martin Luther King's speech, Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution. And we invite all of our viewers to listen to the speech in its entirety, as all of the panelists were encouraged to do. As we're listening to this clip, I would love for us to think about what are our general reflections that we have from the speech, Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution. Let's listen up.
If the inexpressible cruelties of slavery couldn't stop us, the opposition that we now face will surely fail. We're going to win our freedom because both the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of the Almighty God are embodied in our echoing demands. And so however dark it is, however deep the angry feelings are, the violent explosions are, I can still sing, we shall overcome. We shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We shall overcome because Carlyle is right. No lie can live forever. We shall overcome because William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth-crushed earth will rise again. We shall overcome because James Russell Lowell is right, as we were singing earlier today. Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood.
All right, so sorry that there was an echo there. However, as we shared, you definitely have an opportunity to listen to that speech, and our panelists already have. And so we would love to hear from our panelists, and I'm opening this up to anyone who wants to start us off. What were some of the general reflections you had as you watched that video?
Sure, I can start if that works. So one of the main points that I took away from this is that the speech was given, I believe, in the early 1960s, late 1950s, and to think about how much time has passed since then, I believe that none of the panelists that are on this panel this evening were probably even a thought at that point. And to think about how applicable that speech is still to today is both saddening and encouraging that we do have an opportunity to listen back on Dr. King's remarks and still be able to be guided and inspired by his longevity, his perseverance, his commitment to racial equality, his commitment to justice, but also think about where we are as people today. One point that I took away from this one quote is that I am involved in mankind. And I thought about that as in reflection of us being mankind. We hear a lot about people saying, oh, mankind needs to do this, or I wish that the human race was doing more of this. And that is us. It starts with each individual, and each person has his or her own ability to impact the entirety of mankind.
I'd like to jump on what she just said. I actually had a quote that I really liked too. I'm not sure if it was in the video because I couldn't really hear it that well, but I'll just read it. First, we are challenged to develop a world perspective. No individual can live alone. No nation can live alone. And anyone who feels that he can live alone is sleeping through a revolution. The world in which we live is geographically one. The challenge that we face today is to make it one in terms of brotherhood. So this one jumped out to me because it's about togetherness. Right now, we live in a world where it's technically and geographically a world, like Dr. King said, but as human beings, we do struggle with unity and with coming together and with solving problems as a group unit instead of separately. And that's something that is the opposite of what God wants, because he wants everybody to come together to be able to worship him. So that's something that really jumped out at me.
If I may, well, first and foremost, I just want to share with you all that today I'm representing myself, Joseph. I'm not representing the congressman during this event. And yeah, I don't want any words of mine to be misconstrued as his. So I would just like to make that before I proceed. And my mind immediately jumps to the historical context of all of this, from the Emancipation Proclamation to Juneteenth to the era of Jim Crow to the Civil Rights Movement. We've seen the struggle, in some words, the law, how some can use the law for good and so how some can use the law for bad. And the bad just happens to be that it has continuously negatively affected African Americans. And so, you know, when you look at that, you see the struggle and the pain that African Americans have gone through and have continued to go through. And so we look at today's context, you know, how 2021, we're still seeing, you know, African Americans getting unfortunately shot and killed. The argument can be made for or against. However, you're still seeing the bottom line is that African Americans are passing away at unruly numbers. And so you're really seeing the struggle, in my opinion, of how far we have come and how far we still have yet to go. And so I just wanted to, you know, share my comments with Jordan and Sanyu as well.
Thanks. I definitely would love to hop in. I think this is a great conversation, and some of the initial thoughts I had definitely have already been reflected on. I think one thing that really struck me is Dr. King's ability to sort of fluently discuss spirituality and science and technology and politics in a way that I think is honest to the fact that these things are inseparable. You know, the economic situation is very much impacted by how people are relating to their jobs, how they're relating to their churches, what kinds of houses they're able to have access to. And so I think the historical component as well that folks have brought up is so key, because this was given only a month before he was assassinated. So thinking about assassinated by, you know, in collusion with the US government. So thinking of how Dr. King, his ideology was developing at the time, I think is also a really, you know, important moment. Just like he really came a long way in some of the ideas that he presented here.
Thank you everyone for your reflections. My reflection is a bit similar. I'm both saddened and encouraged by this speech. I'm sad because the quote where Dr. King said, "The roots of racism are very deep in our country." It's sad that we're still having the same conversation. You know, this speech is very, very prophetic, but it's like currently, when you think about the roots of racism and you think about how deep these roots are, it's so unfortunate that we still have to have this conversation. But again, it's encouraging because in the clip that was just displayed, we hear that we shall overcome. And I believe there's so many people still fighting, still marching, still writing letters, still donating to NAACP to make a difference, because we are fighting for justice. Another thing that stood out to me in this video is just the meekness and the heart of Dr. King. You know, he had compassion for humankind. He was for righteousness. You know, he stood for righteousness, and he discussed the hard topics. He discussed the injustice that was going on. So in my reflection, I believe it's important that we still to this day fight for education and equality. And it's important for us to just stand up for what we believe in.
Yeah, just going off of what everyone said, I think that this was just like, I think very good timing for me to hear this speech by Dr. King, especially because I think we're in a very particular political moment, and it seems like there's a lot of opportunity for like change to really start happening on a more massive scale. So it was really encouraging to sort of hear the sort of particularity that Dr. King could use in his speeches, and that sort of awareness of what's happening around him, and then connecting that to one of the big themes that I think that he was talking about, which is like not staying asleep during the revolution. Like if we have the opportunity now to make changes and we are not educating ourselves by looking at things that our elders and people in the past have said, such as Dr. King, then we'll sort of return to these same questions over and over again. So I just really appreciate that this was sort of the introductory reading or assignment for this panel.
Mm-hmm. It did strike me a lot with the "Are you sleeping through a revolution?" I think especially now, looking back at when Dr. King gave this speech, there was, of course, not social media, of course, not television, what we know today. Of course, people were protesting and taking to the streets and being arrested, being killed, even for civil rights. That I think it has even more of a profound effect on us today. Of do we even have the excuse to be sleeping through a revolution or through a civil rights movement, which we are in now, right? We saw last June everyone kind of flocking to the streets and the protests and things like that did occur with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many different ways for us to get involved that if you felt physically unsafe going to a protest this past year in 2020, great, then donate. If you didn't, have the monetary funds to donate, then great, post something on social media. If you don't have social media, great, then maybe donate time somewhere else. We no longer have the excuse of sleeping through a revolution. Not to say that people back then did, there just wasn't as many ways and avenues that we have now to get involved. So, that actually really resonated with me because I do think there's so many different ways that we can be involved today.
Exactly, because at this point, it's like a responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're not going to do it, who else is going to do it?
Right.
And there's, like you just listed, all the ways that you can contribute. There is always a solution to every single problem. So even the smallest step will make the biggest difference.
Absolutely.
Well, I think this is a perfect segue into defining what justice and revolution means to all of you. Whenever we're having discussions like this, it's important that we're working from either the same definition or an understanding of how each person we are in communication with is defining certain terms. So in talking about bending the arc towards justice and staying woke in the midst of revolution, can you please define what justice means to you and what revolution means to you? And we'll take 2 speakers.
Sure, I can start with this one again. So when I was, preparing for this and I was looking at definitions and kind of reflecting on myself and what I believe justice to be, one of the dictionary definitions that I came across, just did a quick Google search to see what does it actually say in the dictionary about what justice is. And one of the definitions that came up is people getting what they deserve. And I said, okay, yes, that's the right definition. I believe that is what justice actually is. And then, and kind of reflecting on that definition, I thought, well, what does deserve actually mean? And I think that is where the definition may differ for a lot of people. Maybe in this panel, we all agree what people deserve is what they deserve. And we may all have an agreement on what that actually means. But if you have, maybe a different group of people, a different 7, 8 screens up here, that deserve part may be a little bit different. So to me, I think that there is a bit of a subjective nature to that definition, even though that is what I believe justice to be.
I hope I didn't scare you by limiting it to 2 people.
You definitely did, but that's all right. I can definitely take a stab at this question, or something less hostile sounding. So I fully agree that, I think Dr. King does a great job of sort of qualifying justice and the context of, are we talking about social justice? Are we talking about economic justice? What do we mean? Justice for who? For what? Is it justice for the family of a person whose, child was taken away by the police, murdered by the police or something like that? Is it justice for a different situation, someone who lost their job in the middle of a global pandemic, perhaps? And I think in terms of revolution, I think about that initial quote that was pulled out and that Dr. King talks about, of all things being made new, and thinking about the entire organization of society, the way that our attitudes, the way we think, the way that we make things, how we interact with each other, being completely changed, in those power dynamics of who makes those decisions is completely changed. So people who, the first shall be last, the last shall be first, people who are turned away, looked down upon, who've been, without homes, those will be the folks who are leading our charge and leading our society and saying, this is what we need to do to meet people's needs, because we're the ones who know and have that context. So leaders from there, the working class.
So thank you both for grounding our discussion in these definitions. In your introductions, you all gave us a little bit of a taste of the type of work that you're doing to bring about justice. Can you speak more about your inspiration for the work that you do? And how do you see your work as bringing about justice to your community, to your constituents?
So, let me get a little bit closer to the mic. So my inspiration for starting Brown Kids Read was, well, let me start off first saying it wasn't supposed to be a nonprofit. It was actually because Miss Jordan and Miss Joelle were having an event at Barnes & Noble for their first book, Twin Tales, and I helped organize it, and we needed a name for the event, so we decided to call it Brown Kids Read, and from there, it just turned into a nonprofit towards the end of the year. I decided to turn it into a nonprofit because at that first event, it was amazing. There were little kids who were so excited to see a book display filled with people who reflected them. And that was amazing to see the joy in their faces. They got to meet authors. Their parents got to fellowship with other parents who were interested in those kind of books. And it was a great experience altogether. So I wanted to replicate that. And then I looked around at my peers and I noticed that they didn't have access to diverse literature when they were younger, like those little kids at the new event just did. So I wanted to make sure that the next generation coming up behind us had that same opportunity and access to diverse literature, despite their race, their ethnicity, social status, or their financial situation. So Brown Kids Read is helping to push the narrative of justice, especially for the Black community and other minorities, because I feel like something that has been taken from us for a long time is opportunities for education. And the more you read, the more you know. The more you read, the more your vocabulary is extended. The more you read, the more experiences that you get to have, even if you might not have it in real life. And you get to see other people's, their culture. You get to learn. Books are basically a physical manifestation of knowledge. So I think that Brown Kids Read's mission, which is to inspire all children, but especially children of color, it's to, spark a light. It's to start a fire in somebody who may not know that they're a reader, and to give them the opportunity to read so that they can find out what they like and so that they can learn as much as possible.
I like to jump in there, and thank you, Tanya. I think that's the work that everyone is doing is excellent. My nonprofit, Youth Enrichment Center, we try to minimize justice through our programs. So one of the events that we did have last year was a financial literacy workshop. And so we taught the importance of saving, even as a kid, investing, having good money habits. Some of our youth are in college now. So we talked about credit cards, the pros and cons of credit cards, and even having a debt, and how to just read the details and instructions of applying when you're applying for student loans. Also, we teach we take the kids out. I believe in education through learning and having different experiences. So we've taken the children to the Washington, D.C. Memorial, and we've taken them to different historical landmarks around the country. And I believe education is power. Having different experiences enriches your culture, even through travel. We've gone to Africa, to Kenya, with my nonprofit organization, just to give the experience to enrich their minds and change their lives. So we've done a lot of different programs over the last 10 years to help children just reshape their thinking in terms of culture. And prayerfully, like, we're going to continue to keep going to help just minimize the injustice that's going on.
I would like to speak to the work that we do for Media Planet, our jobs day to day, similar to what Sonia was saying in terms of justice. To me, of course, when we think of justice, we think of the legal system. I think most people think of that. But for me, justice a lot means making sure that all cultures are represented, of course, in the media, and we particularly work in media and marketing. So for our campaigns that we do, we call them campaigns. Other people may call them inserts within larger newspaper publications, but the main larger newspaper that we work with at Media Planet to put out these advocacy and awareness campaigns is USA Today. And USA Today is a great partner of ours. We love working with them, but they do have a very white, male-dominated audience. And we do campaigns on a ton of different topics, mostly healthcare and education, two sectors in which we know Black and Brown people are vastly underrepresented and vastly underserved. So at Media Planet, especially my job in particular, what I've been working on for the last 7 months or so, is making sure that our stories are told in those campaigns. So campaigns that tackle topics like clinical trials, blood cancer, education technology, access to health and education, and making sure that people who are going through experiences such as infertility issues, breast cancer, making sure that our stories are told in those publications, despite the fact that we're going out in a very white, male-dominated publication.
You've spoken a lot about some various institutions that we want to take into consideration. I would love for us to explore that a little bit further. So in thinking about some of the institutions that have maintained our community, what comes to mind for me is the family and the church and education, our school systems as well. And so I would love if you all would share with us, because there are definitely many educators, preachers, and teachers who are online right now, feverishly taking notes of what you all are sharing with us, that want to know how do they foster an environment at home, school, or church that will develop a commitment to justice and revolution in the youth that they are raising. So what did your family, your school, your church do or not do to cultivate your views or your desire to be a leader?
I think when it comes to family, I think definitely reaching out and lending a hand. I know for several years, my family and I, we did Sidewalk Sunday School, where we went to an underserved community, specifically Plainfield, and we did Sunday school for the community members and teenagers and youth and young adults, and we went out there and taught them about the value of Christ and the importance of knowing God for themselves. And so that helped me develop who I am today, giving back, lending a hand, reaching out to those who may be underserved, reaching out, contacting people who are maybe struggling. And when it comes to the institutions, because you mentioned the institutions, one of the institutions that I currently work in is the political field. And specifically in New Jersey, I reside in Middlesex County, and there seems to be a lacking of Black and Brown elected officials. Yes, we do have our elected officials who are minorities, but we don't have African-American elected officials. And if you look at the state of New Jersey, out of the 40 legislative districts, there's only 5 state senators out of the 40. And that's a terrible representation. And then when it comes to congressional representatives, there's only 2, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman, as well as Donald Payne over the Newark region. And so it's easy to be an African American over a county or a township that has other African Americans. But what is difficult and what I've been noticing is that there hasn't been African Americans over positions that are not African American. And that is the aspect. And I think that is what we have to work towards, being comfortable with people who may not look like you and people who may not, come from the same background, but they have your interest in mind and they want to lend a hand, they want to help you. And I think that is where the disconnect happens.
Yeah, if I could just go off of that, I think in terms of the questions of the institutions and how sort of I've been impacted in a positive way to be in service to community. I think that one of the biggest things that comes to mind is just that like both of my parents are teachers and they're like very spiritual and like dedicated to the religious community. And I think that having my parents both be people who are committed to service was probably the strongest example for why service was important and why and how it can be helpful and how it can make you feel good to be in service to others. And then I would also say that for the education field specifically, but also in general, I think like cultivating a sense of curiosity for people who are growing up is really important, and allowing them to ask questions and to give critiques of like the world as they see it. I think that all of those are really important for developing someone who has like a consciousness that's like critical enough to demand change when there's injustice that's happening. Yeah.
So you mean we can't just tell you do what you say, and we actually have to engage you and allow you to think for yourselves?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that actually, because my parents do a really good job of listening to what I'm saying. So I just want to say for all the parents out there, especially if you have teenagers, just hear them out. Please just hear them out. Because we do have a lot of good ideas, and it's awesome because I have a good relationship with my parents because I feel like I can tell them anything and I can talk to them about anything. And it's just a great environment because they don't shut me down when I ask questions. They engage. We can look it up on Google together, find the answer. They always tell me stories about their childhood and their life experiences. And I've just learned a lot from them. So I think that's a great thing for parents to do specifically.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want us to explore this just a bit further because our bishop has a heart to serve and engage everybody and wishes that none of us would be. But he has a special desire to keep our youth connected and grounded in the faith. So what are you and your peers, and I know you don't speak for everyone in your generation, but what are you and your peers looking for in a faith community at this age and during this time? And I can definitely feel through the airwaves all of the educators and the preachers listening intently to know what is it that we can do to draw you in, keep you connected and grounded in the faith.
I think just honestly common everyday fellowship and community. We have the privilege, of course, of growing up in the cathedral, and that is our home church and will always be our home church. But we have, because we live in Hoboken, we have fostered a bit of a spiritual community here as well, since it is a closer and convenient. And the communities in both churches that we've had the opportunity to be a part of and experience. And I will say that the church that we have visited a few times here in Hoboken is just that, a few times. So it's definitely a different experience than what I have the 28 years that I've been with the cathedral. And I think the what we're looking for in kind of our age group, and Joelle and I are 28 years old, so I'm speaking for the 20-somethings and maybe one of the 30-somethings, although I'm not there yet. We are kind of just looking for fellowship and community that we can have conversations like this that maybe are a little bit serious, a little bit more elevated, very educational conversations, but also everyday conversations of just, how are you doing? What does your day look like during a pandemic? Maybe not even talking about the pandemic sometimes, just kind of talking about things that are happening day in and day out. We're privileged to work in a community day in and day out, again, for our daily jobs at Media Planet, where everybody is very much the same age. We've always worked with people who are 20-somethings, and it's refreshing to have conversations with them. When we moved out of our parents' house, of kind of like, how did you go about paying your rent for the first time? Where did you buy your couch? Just those kind of very common conversations. When do you go home? What do you cook over the weekends? Just, sometimes I think we either have no conversations and no interaction, or very deep conversations and very deep interaction. I think something in between, 0 to 100, we're kind of looking for that like 50, at least for me, and just to kind of have that fellowship and community day in and day out.
So I'm 33, so I'm like in the 30 age range, and I'm blessed to be an associate minister at Cathedral International, but I have friends all over the world. And so when we talk about faith and we talk about community, what I realize, a lot of my friends who don't attend church, they're looking for a leader that is transparent. They're looking for a leader that's honest. And they're looking for community that's kind of like virtual, especially with the pandemic, you can't physically go and sit down in a church. And even when they could sit in a church, sometimes attire would be an issue for them because they didn't want to attend church due to what the restrictions of what they would be wearing to go to church. So definitely, they want in terms of looking at leadership for the community or church that they would be able to attend. They want the preacher or the leader to be relatable and non-judgmental, because a lot of people in my age group, they just feel judged by the way they look, judged by the way they talk, judged by what they wear, and they try to like avoid the church setting because of all the judgment. And so they'd rather just avoid, have one-on-one time with Jesus. If they meet someone and you talk about God, then they'll connect. But that's really what they're looking for. No judgment zone.
Yes, I'd like to hop in on that question. I do think it relates well to the institutions of family and church that we were talking about before. And to bring it to, again, to Dr. King's piece, if we are in a revolutionary moment, then we should also, in staying awake, also be aware of how we might need to revolutionize these institutions and our attitudes toward them. And I think one thing that, Cathedral has done it well in my experience is had like a variety of experiences that I think not all churches have the capacity to offer so many different ways to engage, which I think is something we should continue to do, and then ground that variety of experiences in the needs of the people who we're trying to bring in. So having conversations with, young people, what have you, like these, I think are really great. And just to be brief, I think definitely piggyback on non-judgmental spaces. And I think a positive alternative to judgment is affirmation and understanding, yes, like people sin, like, yes, you are blessed, yes, you are loved. I think these are things that that kind of validation is super important, not just for young people, but for elders in the church, for everyone, adults. It's important for everyone to know that they are truly, genuinely loved in who they are as a person, with all their faults, and that the church is a place to grow and not a place that people will expect you to already be there when you're still on a journey.
Yeah, I'd like to add. I'm 16, so right now I see a whole bunch of teenagers who don't want to be in the church setting because they are forced to do it. So like their parents will tell them, oh, you have to go to church, oh, you have to go to church. Of course, as a teenager, once somebody tells you what you have to do, you're not going to want to do it. So I feel like one of the first steps to making my age group specifically more interested and more excited to attend not just church, but church functions, fellowship, is making it appealing to the generation. So right now we have a lot of things going on. We have social media, we have movies, TV, and a whole bunch of things to do with technology. And I think that incorporating it into the church experience, I mean, right now we have to because we're in a pandemic, but just finding ways to make it appealing for teenagers specifically is really important because they're drifting. They're drifting away, and especially because of the circumstances the world is in right now, it's harder to like rein them all in and get them together so that we can fellowship and worship Christ together. But it's a lot harder. And even before, it was very, very hard to get them interested.
I hear that. And my follow-up question is, how do we get you interested? Because I think sometimes adults in these various institutions think that they are doing work of engaging you. They think that they are, they're using technology. They're trying to be relevant, and yet it still seems like we are not drawing in the same way. That there is that competition of other that's taking your attention away. So are there some other concrete, in addition to having forums like this and conversations, what are the other things that we can do?
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh no, you go. I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, I would say that this is a platform like this is ideal, where you have the opportunity to hear from varying. I mean, there is still a finite age group here. Sanyu is 16, and then we have people in their 20s, 30s, so a little bit of a broad range there, but just listening to what it is that is appealing to different people. And I think Gabby touched on it really well, of offering that variety. What works for me as a 28-year-old might not work for Jordan, who's also 28. I love reading emails. I love email marketing. I don't know if it's because I'm in marketing, but I like reading the emails and getting that information in that way, where somebody else may prefer to come on a Facebook Live like this every Friday night, and somebody else may prefer to have a tangible item. We were able to connect with a couple of people our own age through the ashes that were distributed. So we had, we were able to get those to some of our friends and connect virtually through Instagram stories and in non-traditional church ways, through being able to connect with them through sending them ashes and sending them prayer cards. So that was a fun way for us to be able to connect with people from work who we don't even normally talk about religion with, and to bring them in to Cathedral specifically through tangible items. So just offering that variety, because what may work for me right now at 28 might be different than what works for me at 35, or what works for Sanyu at 16. So I think just offering that variety, like Gabby mentioned, is ideal. Mm-hmm. If I can add on that, I actually was listening to a Instagram Live this morning while I was working from a person that we know just through a family friend, and he is a hairstylist, and he actually has done hair for Beyonce, for Destiny's Child, for a whole bunch of people. So of course I was interested because of that, the quote unquote cool factor. You name drop Beyonce, and of course most people are listening. Mm-hmm. And most of his interview actually was about his faith and how he grew up in his church and the community and the mentors and the role models that he has through his church. And it did get my mind thinking of, wow, if somebody has an opportunity to promote somebody, their name doesn't have to be attached to Beyonce. It could be people right here on this panel. It could be someone like Sanyu, who maybe I'm a 16-year-old and I'm like, wow, she has her own business. I want to learn more. And then in her interview, I'm like, wait, she also goes to church? I need to find out more about this, right? So just kind of finding that thing that excites people and kind of drawing them in that way. And then using that vessel, and this is what we all do, I think, in our day-to-day, using our vessel to preach the message of Christ and to preach what we do and where our community comes from and where our light shines from to the rest of the world, through the gifts that have been given to us and are maybe used in a more mainstream secular way. But how do we get there is through the church, and that can be something that we promote to the world.
I'm struggling here because I have like 3 more questions, but I see we only have 10 minutes remaining, and I'm just enjoying this conversation. So I hope that you all will be willing to share with us again. I'm going to paraphrase something because you all mentioned what you enjoy listening to or watching. I'm paraphrasing here, of course, but Malcolm X once said the worst thing the white man has taught us is to hate ourselves. I would like to add that sometimes that's consciously, and sometimes that may be unconsciously because of interpretations that we were taught about text or events or even leaders. So what are you currently reading or watching, and why? And who are some examples of leaders you find influential that you would recommend to other leaders?
So I have my book. Oh wait, it's covered by the logo. Okay, I am reading Stamped.
Yes.
It's the Jason Reynolds version, and I just started it. But I'm really excited to read it. The book I just finished, it's called Muted. It's by Tammy Charles, which is really cool. Yes, oh my goodness. Let me not even get into that book because I almost cried. Like my heart was beating.
I'll call you because that's
It's
what
a
I'm reading
crazy
next.
story. And I got to interview the author too, so that was awesome. And this is the book I'm reading. I can just read the description really quick so that everybody knows what it's about. It's about anti-racism, and it says the construct of race has always been used to gain and keep power, to create dynamics that separate and silence. Racist ideas are woven into the fabric of this country, and the first step to building an anti-racist America is acknowledging America's racist past and present. This book takes you on this journey and showing how racist ideas started and were spread and how they can be discredited. So I would suggest this book, and that's what I'm reading right now. One of the leaders that I think is really cool is actually Miss Valerie. She is the leader of our youth group at church, and every single time I go on the calls, it makes my day better just to see her smile because she's so cheery and she's such a great person to be around, and she has such great insight. Like she said before, she has so many great life experiences and she's been so many places, met a lot of different people, and she is always able to talk people through problems, and I think that's something that God put in her spirit because she just has a calming presence.
God bless you. Thank you.
I can piggyback off of that. You can, say a shameless plug for myself here. You can follow @_completely_booked on Instagram for anything that I'm reading. It is my book Instagram, which they call a bookstagram, and talk about a small segment community of the internet. Bookstagram is one, if you don't know yet. I did read Stamped. Sonia, you'll be done with it probably before the end of the weekend. It's incredible. And so you can follow any books there. I won't kind of go into it to a bunch of different books that I have read. If I have to plug one that you must read, it is Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. At this point, honestly, Isabel needs to reach out to me because I've told every person in the world to read this book, but definitely read Cast. And one role model that I would say that I look up to and watch daily is Elaine Welter Roth. She was the editor-in-chief at Teen Vogue and was the first African-American and youngest person to be in that position for a Vogue branded magazine, and is now on the talk every day on CBS.
So just to add on to that, I too brought some books with me. So just one quick second. I just finished Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, which is a challenging read. There's a lot of concepts and a lot of similes and metaphors, but it's a very, very good book. It's basically back to your quote, how the Malcolm X quote, and how sometimes our lives can lack value if you don't believe in yourself. And if you believe all of the other concepts that are being perpetuated into your mindset, into your heart, into your psyche every day, you easily fall into the trap of nothingness. And this book kind of talks about that. And then one last book that I finished over the summer, but I thought was very, very good, I think everybody in the world has read this at this point. It's called The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, and it talks about the prison system and how the next caste system is the unfortunate prison system, and as well as the privatization of prisons, and how this is not just a new concept. It's something that has been planned, thought out, financed, and kind of developed through kind of all these different things that have been, in a sense, not really paid attention to. So I think that book is an extraordinary book about the current caste system and what we can do to change the system moving forward. And there has been some stuff legislation-wise that has been either passed in the House or the Senate or vice versa that talks about the prisons. And so I know I'm not here to represent the congressman, but one of the people that I do look up to is Congressman Pallone, which is my boss. And I think he does a fantastic job of really reaching out and lending a hand to not just people in his community, but the people around the entire United States. I think that takes an honorable man, as well as Bishop Hilliard, obviously. I think we all, have interacted with Bishop, and we know his heart, and we know what he can do and continues to do. So I think those two, wonderful, extraordinary men are just invaluable. So I think those two books and those two men are great.
And to add, I'm a doctoral student, so I'm reading so many books and articles, and the list goes on and on and on. But for one of my landscaping classes, I'm reading Making Room for Leadership, Power, Space, and Influence. And it's an article that encourages you to not take leadership or to not take power into your whole hands and use it negatively, right? So when you're in leadership, you have the power and influence to make or break a person. And so since I'm a leader and I'm clergy, it's just a reminder to be conscious of words that you speak, conscious of how you interact with people, be conscious of your body language, because your body language speaks volumes, And so, in another book that I'm reading, which is going to come out, is my second book, as I mentioned, Single to Marriage. So I'm just excited to just share like my journey. And I also have contributors to the book that speak about being single, speak about being engaged, speak about being married, divorced, and widowed, and to help people in those hard spaces that sometimes we often don't speak about. So I encourage you all not to put it out there, but to put it out there, to read it if you're just in that journey of being like single to marriage.
Awesome. It's definitely okay to put it out there. That's part of what this is all about and the connections that we're making. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I definitely want us to close out on time. And so I was going to ask you all about self-care, and I hope that we will have an opportunity to gather again so we can talk about that more extensively. But I would love to end this platform with you all sharing what is, you have an opportunity to speak to your peers and colleagues right now. What's one piece of advice you have to offer them about bending the arc towards justice, wherever they work, they live, and they play? AJ, can you start us off?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think that I would say to people who are seeking to bend the arc towards justice, I really like the quote that Dr. King said, where he said, like, no person is a island unto themselves. We're all involved in mankind, personkind, what have you. And I think that when I think about how connected I am to communities that are around me, that it's a humbling experience, and also it's very helpful in allowing me to see why it's so important that we do work for the communities that we're a part of, because we aren't just living in a vacuum. We're in a world where we're building relationships with other folks, and just like giving back to something that's already given so much to us is a way that I encourage myself to keep on fighting the good fight.
And just to quickly add on to that, I know that it's a season of really trying to make change. And so if you would like to make change, it starts oftentimes at the local level. And so, how many of us really go to our council meetings? How many of us go to our Board of Education meetings where these decisions are being voted on? You can voice your opinion. You can get things changed. You can create a group and go there and talk about these issues. I think that's where it really starts. We all look at the national level, but really the local level is what you can make the biggest impact.
I also believe it starts with self-reflection. I believe before you can make change, you need to reflect on your strengths. You need to reflect on your weaknesses. You need to kind of do some soul searching to see what you're good at and what ways you can make an impact. And I also believe in inviting God into your decision-making skills. So praying about it, praying to see what you can do to make a difference and have a impact to bend the arc towards justice.
I would say, going back to Sonya's point that she mentioned earlier about her parents listening to her and having an understanding for her, if we are all able to do that, especially where we work and where we play, and allowing diverse voices and diverse opinions into our own lives, we become more empathetic and more understanding towards one another, which goes back to that initial definition that we talked about of every person getting what he or she deserves. And then that idea of what do they deserve becomes more common the more that we're able to diversify our understanding of other people's situations, financially, their social status, whatever it is. We have a greater understanding for what people are going through in that particular moment.
And I also think that young people sometimes kind of discount themselves because they're like, I'm young, what can I even do to make a difference? But the first thing I would say, and the first step to take would be to find what you love and figure out a way to help people with it. For example, I like reading, so I started a nonprofit about reading. Somebody might like sports, so they might try to help minorities have more opportunities in the field of sports. Somebody might, they might love singing. Okay, so go sing to people at an elderly home to let them know that people care. Just find a way to impact somebody else. And it doesn't even have to be big. You can write your neighbor a card wishing them a good day. And that's going to help the world become more united, like we talked about before, because showing kindness in little ways and being intentional about showing the love of God to others is something that a lot of people overlook. And I think it's something we need to start being more intentional about.
And there you have it, family. Excellence at its finest. We thank you all so very much for your time this evening. And we definitely want to thank Sister Leslie Lacoma and Brother Lloyd Vaughn for tremendous technical support. And we definitely have to have you all back again. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface in getting to know you and hearing what you had to share. And I'm confident the pearls of wisdom each of you share tonight either sparked a or continue to stoke the fire for those listening. And I just want to close out with a word of prayer to make sure that all of you are covered as you continue in your journey. So let us look to the Lord. God, we thank you for the lives and works of your children. We pray that you continue to cover them with a hedge of protection as they work in your vineyard. Lord, please open the doors of opportunity that no man or woman can shut, and open up the floodgates of heaven and rain down blessings. Lord, you said in your word that no weapon, including the thoughts, the words, and the deeds of others that are formed against your children shall prosper. So we thank you, Lord, for the grace to endure, even when the night is long and the weight of the work is heavy. Help us, Lord, to be advocates, allies, and the beloved community you have called us to be. In the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Amen.
God bless you all and all the work that you do. We love you, and we look forward to hearing from you again soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
Bye.